Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Crypto for Good, How Digital Assets Are Transforming Charitable Giving. My name is Nick Brooks, and I am the Policy Director for CryptoUK. And we've got a very nice panel of guests today to talk to us about the subject. And as cryptocurrency adoption continues to grow, charities are increasingly embracing digital assets as a powerful new fundraising channel. And so what we'd like to focus on today is how philanthropy is becoming a bigger part of crypto payments in particular. And so this is not really a technical crypto panel, but rather a conversation about fundraising, donor behavior, infrastructure, policy, and impact. So today we'll be covering why crypto donations are becoming an increasing part of charitable giving, how charities go about engaging with digital assets for fundraisers, how crypto donors represent a different segment of potential donors, and how it helps charities serve their core mission. So before we get started, I just thought I would introduce you to our panelists so they can introduce themselves, share which organization they represent, and provide a little bit of background about themselves. So perhaps I can hand over to you, Cinta.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to CryptoUK for inviting me to be part of today's discussion. I'm Cinta Esmel. I'm Director of Development at Roald Dahl's Marvellous Children's Charity. Yes, the charity with the longest name. We support more than 50,000 seriously ill children across the UK through a network of over 250 Roald Dahl nurses, and we provide them with practical and emotional support. My role is to ensure that we continue to grow and that we build sustainable income and develop new partnerships. And that includes exploring innovative ways to engage with people who want to support our work. And I'm delighted to be here and look forward to sharing our experience, which is just our experience. And thank you to everyone for joining today.
Thanks, Cinta. And perhaps I can hand over to Jessica next.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And thanks again, as Cinta said, to CryptoUK for hosting this talk. I think it'll be a really interesting discussion. I'm Jess. I work at Alzheimer's Research UK in the online fundraising team. And I lead on the crypto fundraising project at our charity. Alzheimer's Research UK is the UK's leading dementia research charity. And we work with laboratories all over the country to find a cure for dementia. You might have recognised our orange branding in cinemas or on adverts recently. And yeah, we've been accepting crypto since 2023. So really looking forward to kind of talking about how that's gone for us.
Great. And Aidan.
Hi, everyone. As my panelists said, excited to be here. So my name is Aidan Alberico. I'm the head of corporate sustainability at LMAX Group. So if you haven't heard of LMAX Group before, we are a leading global operator of institutional trading venues across FX and digital assets, and we're one of the world's foremost cross-asset marketplaces. So we work with institutional clients to move money across the globe with ultra-high speeds, ultra-low latency, and with a high-performance infrastructure. So to give a little bit of context to that, so we moved $8 trillion last year across over 100 countries. And my role is, alongside leading our sustainability strategy, is to oversee how we work with our third sector clients. So helping charities and nonprofits accept donations and digital assets, stablecoins, and traditional currencies from anywhere in the world. And really, our core mission is to help funds reach the people and causes that need it most. So we remove unnecessary barriers and intermediaries that can slow down or add costs to the movement of funds. And ultimately, our goal is to give charities better financial infrastructure, leading to better financial inclusion and resilience.
Great. Thank you, Aidan. Just a quick note for the audience. You should be able to see a chat feature on your screen. So if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please do feel free to put them into the chat, and we'll make sure we can get to those towards the end of the discussion. So moving on, let's focus on the opportunity of crypto donations. And perhaps we can just focus a little bit about why are charities looking towards crypto donations as a source for donations and funding. So, perhaps Cinta, you can share with some of your experience on this question.
Yeah. So obviously, fundraising has always evolved with society. Not long time ago, charities in the morning, they opened envelopes and checked if there were checks inside. That doesn't happen that much at this point. People are managing their finances differently. Therefore, charities need to change how they think about receiving donations. How do we facilitate that? So the conversation for us was never so much about cryptocurrency, blockchain. I assure you, nobody is an expert in our team. It was about removing barriers for those people who wanted or potentially wanted to support our charity and seriously ill children, and ensure that we were able to receive that support. As digital assets become more mainstream, obviously people manage their wealth and philanthropy differently. We felt it was important that we just had a way to respond to that. Something really, really important is that we wanted to do it in a measured and well-governed way. Because I will explain there are certain risks attached to it. But the opportunity was not so much to replace traditional fundraising with this new type of fundraising, but to enhance it and to engage with individuals and organizations that otherwise would not engage with us. And if I had a message for any charity that at this point is still skeptical, I will tell them it's not so much about cryptocurrency, blockchain, technology. It's more thinking about your pool of supporters and potential supporters. Would they feel more comfortable? Would you be facilitating their philanthropy if you were accepting crypto donations? So yeah, it's not about technology. It's about making philanthropy easier, making generosity easier for everybody. And I think that's a genuine opportunity beyond technology and blockchains.
Great, thanks, Cinta. And how about you, Jess? From Alzheimer's research perspective, when did you guys start looking at accepting crypto donations? And perhaps you can share, some perspective for people who may be skeptical about the option or the possibility of looking towards crypto as a source of funds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I totally echo everything Cinta said, especially the point about it being a kind of charity by charity decision. You've got to kind of analyze your circumstances and your supporter pool, and whether there's a gel between the fundraising potential that crypto certainly holds, and your audience. I mean, there's always opportunity to find your audiences as well. But yeah, Alzheimer's Research UK, we're obviously a research charity, and innovation and kind of forward progress is really at the heart of all we do. So we apply that to our fundraising as well, which is why we're really keen to be finding new communities and new technologies to help fund our research to find a cure for dementia. And that was why in 2023 we started accepting crypto very much from the kind of looking for new communities perspective. We saw the potential there. There were other notable UK charities who had some successes with crypto, and we just noticed that there was a really engaged, enthusiastic community, which is something that we've since seen in CryptoUK and various other community groups who were kind of perhaps held crypto and keen to give it to charities, but not all charities had that infrastructure in place. So that's really why we set it up, to kind of as Cinta said, to provide the pathway to new communities, and also use those new technologies, which is something we're continuing to do. And to your point about other charities who might be skeptical or unsure about whether to accept crypto, I think one thing that all charities really need to make sure, if they're going to onboard some crypto infrastructure, is just really make sure that they've got a strong understanding of the kind of safety and security protocols around it. It's obviously important from a reputational perspective, but also just to make sure that your experience in the crypto community is as positive as possible. It's fairly easy to do that, but just kind of have an awareness of those tools and resources that can help onboarding these communities and these technologies a little bit easier for the charity.
Great. And Aidan, how about you? How did LMAX come to get involved in crypto donations? And perhaps you can share a bit more about how you think about digital fundraising.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for us, so LMAX Group maybe is not a brand named, recognized organization, but we have operated in digital assets for the last 16 years. We work with top 40 banks. And my role since joining the organization has been on that focus of, okay, how do we build fair markets and how do we basically remove barriers for access so that way the third sector can benefit the same way that banking infrastructure has for a long time. So with the work that we're doing at LMAX Group, it's for us about, okay, there's a need in the market. People are starting to look to make crypto donations. There is infrastructure partners, but infrastructure partners that are maybe not UK based, that, don't have custody in-house and that aren't able to offer the low base points that we are when it comes to the conversion layers. So for us, this is really like an extension of our philanthropic arm and how do we actually support the sector as a whole with our operational power. So that's a little background about why we kind of came into this space. And as I said, it's kind of an extension of what we've been doing with charities anyways, and how we've been knowledge sharing and building that financial resilience and inclusion piece. In terms of how we're looking more broadly at digital fundraising. So obviously digital assets being just one asset class. So cryptos, stablecoins, obviously there's a lot of increase in understanding there. There's more donations flow coming through that. Charities are looking to that space because on average, the donation sizes are larger. So on average, a donation size in cryptocurrencies could be 11,000 USD in comparison to $25 to $50 in fiat. So they're looking to move towards that space. And what we're kind of extending that is how do we actually look at cross-border payments on large? So how do we remove friction when people are actually trying to move money cross-border? Because that's where the conversion layer really matters. From when the second you hit donate to when it's being received by a beneficiary, the multi-layer admin fees that charities are being hit with is astronomical. It's upwards of 5-7% from when you hit donate. So we're really trying to remove that friction and make sure that those donations aren't eroded beyond just stable coins and cryptocurrencies and fiat at large.
Great. Thanks, Aidan. That's really interesting. And perhaps we can sort of turn the conversation towards looking at the infrastructure for charities and how they go about setting up the capability to receive donations from crypto and perhaps some of the challenges that charities might have to go through internally to achieve that buy-in for perhaps for management or for leadership teams to recognize the opportunity. So Cinta, perhaps you can tell us about your experience from that perspective.
Yeah, and this is based on our journey, and we were one of the first charities in the UK to accept crypto donations. I think the conversations potentially started in 2020, 2021. I cannot emphasize this enough. This was not a technology project for the charity. This was a governance project for the charity. That was the core of the conversations, particularly at the beginning. People were not asking me questions about blockchain. Don't get me wrong. People wanted to know, but you can copy paste an explanation way more eloquent that I would explain them. But the real questions to me were around other things, nothing to do with technology. I was very keen to make it clear that what we were asking, particularly the board of trustees, was not for them to endorse a type of technology, not to endorse a flavor of the month that moment was going on. We were asking them to, what I said before, remove an unnecessary barrier for a particular set of individuals who potentially could be interested in investing in our charity and support our beneficiaries. So a key thing was, yes, not framing this as technology, governance, listening to everybody, and taking every concern seriously. And the concerns around cryptocurrency are very diverse, from environmental to complete disbelief on these individuals who they see on TikTok talking about crypto. So I think one of the key things was do not dismiss some of the questions, some of the concerns, because they were all valid. And it was something so new at that point that we took time to address all of that. So I would say a key thing was ensure that trustees knew everything, understood what we were asking for, and were on board before moving as a charity. We ensure, secondly, to have clear financials policies. How would we process, receive, record these donations? And there were different options, and we tested all our options at that point. Another element that took time was compliance and due diligence. What are we going to do? Particularly connected with anonymity, and hopefully at some point we will talk about that. But yeah, we cannot minimize the amount of due diligence concern and compliance concern around crypto donations. A key concern and a key risk, I think, is the reputational risk. Some of the risk is real. Some of the risk is just perception, but perception is real as well. So as a charity, you need to take care of, in our case, 35 years of a legacy of an organization, do it good. We cannot take unnecessary risk. And there was a reputational risk around accepting crypto donations. So we did everything to minimize those reputational risks. And then we needed operational clarity. Everybody had a part to play, from the person answering the phone to financial people, marketing people. Everybody had to be briefed, trained, educated around crypto philanthropy. I think that the real challenge internally was convincing ourselves that we wanted to embrace innovation. However, we didn't want to compromise on the governance side or take any unnecessary risk. So it was that balance, opportunity, innovation, but cautiousness, avoiding risk, and ensuring that this is not going to explode at some point in 6 months. In a nutshell, I think that is our journey.
Thanks, Cinta. I think that's such a good point, isn't it? You have to take these things carefully and seriously. And, there must be so many different perceptions that people might have about crypto when you start on this question or on this journey. How about you, Jess? From your perspective, how was that whole challenge? Did you face many obstacles when it came to looking to set up crypto donations in your organization?
But very similar to Roald Dahl's journey, I suppose, in the sense of getting that the governance elements and the due diligence elements really in place from the off, for all the reasons that Cinta talked about. I suppose a secondary point that's been an ongoing piece of work as we continue to grow our crypto portfolio and institute the program in the long term is the kind of upskilling element and the knowledge sharing element of crypto, because as a company we've got a lot of charity experts, but our blockchain knowledge is probably smaller, which is why it's so helpful to be part of CryptoUK. So we've hosted a lot of kind of staff upskilling sessions, especially for our staff members who interact with supporters face to face or go to events where they might be meeting individuals who hold crypto and want to know what the pathways are. Having at least a kind of familiarity with terminology, I suppose, a basic familiarity if nothing else, has really helped our fundraisers with that, and that's something we continue to do. So as well as getting all the governance and due diligence in place, there's that kind of educational element, whilst also maintaining the kind of the rigor of due diligence throughout. I suppose it would be true to say that crypto, more so than our other fundraising projects, we really hold the due diligence to a high standard in terms of the companies that we're approaching or the technologies that we're looking at, just for the reasons that Cinta said, that there's various reputational risks, I suppose. But yeah, that would be I suppose that educational element would be the caveat I would add.
Great. And Aidan, I imagine from your perspective, typically the charities are the clients and the people that you're working with. So perhaps you can share some experience from your perspective about how do you work with those charities to help them on board with this technology? And perhaps there are some challenges or concerns that those clients might expect to have that you typically help them with?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole movement towards cryptocurrencies, obviously, as you know, Jessica and Cinta mentioned, there is a reputation that organizations are aware of, and I think it's quite difficult because it can be sometimes a technically complex, piece of technology, and it is emerging. And as you said, there's a lot of noise online around, how do we engage with this asset class responsibly? So my biggest piece of advice is obviously partner with an organization that understands it. So for us, this is our infrastructure. This is what we do with the top 40 banks, and charities being one of our client sects, but working across all different organizations and how we provide support. So, I mean, really, you don't have to be an expert in-house. I think that charities are under a lot of pressure to have these expertise and really, be innovative when there's budgeting constraints, resource constraints. So relying on the private sector is a way to kind of force that innovation. So I think it's about bringing in the right partners. And with that, you don't necessarily have to always have the right questions. It's about going on the journey together of, okay, let's talk to your, treasury team, your finance team together. Let's look at the compliance. A good example that we like to use is the fact that a couple of years ago, organizations were very wary of AI, and now everyone kind of feels comfortable with AI, and most organizations now have to have an AI policy. We're going to see that transition towards digital assets and having to understand how do we engage with these asset classes as they become more commonplace with the shift of stablecoins. So yeah, biggest piece of advice I would just be to pick a partner that you trust, like LMAX Group, if that's who you choose to work with, and ask the right questions. And we're here to really provide knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Aidan. And perhaps we can sort of turn the focus a little bit to the donor perspective. So, crypto donors, I imagine, are typically quite different in a number of different ways in terms of their characteristics to perhaps your traditional donor. So, Jess, perhaps you can share, how has it been, first of all, sort of identifying and working with those types of donors, and how do they differ from your typical donors? I mean, anonymity and pseudonymity is definitely something that we are obviously more familiar with in the crypto industry. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, definitely. And that, I think, is one of the most interesting things that we've grappled with as a charity. Is the anonymity of the crypto donor. We're so used to having in-person fundraisers and I don't know, knitters or walkers or runners who we can put a face to a name, who are really out there and fundraising for the charity. Contrast that with our traditional crypto donor who really prefers anonymity. On our platform, they usually choose to give anonymously and rarely follow up with conversations. And that has given us a kind of very interesting challenge, I suppose, of saying, well, if we don't know, we don't have enough data to form a demographic for our charity. I suppose obviously there's sector data. How do we know what platforms to communicate with them? How do we know what sort of comms to put out? How do we know to optimize the journey, et cetera, et cetera? And that has really been just a matter of testing different approaches and then looking how that affects donations really, and taking that data-led approach. And that's really all about optimizing our donor journey for the preference for anonymity, really. So we're not forcing them to opt into an ongoing email stewardship journey, which is something we would more traditionally do with our walkers or our runners. And we're kind of putting the ball in their court for carrying on that conversation, which we have found works successfully for kind of optimizing for that sort of audience, really. So that's what we've seen as a charity. But then looking sector wide, we know that the traditional crypto user demographically is younger, more tech literate, which really differs from our traditional demographic of supporters, which I think is a positive, really, because it allows us to open up new communities and new fundraising demographics who we previously wouldn't have contact with. And I think one point that I'd be keen to stress with all of this is if a charity is thinking of onboarding crypto and how to find out who the people are, so to speak, we found in the last couple of years really that in-person crypto or blockchain events is such a useful resource for understanding the demographic and the communities a bit more. And whilst these might not be your specific donors, they have the kind of the ideas and the conversations that your donors might be having. So that really helps us understand it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I get the impression, that there really are some very different characteristics that you might find among your sort of typical donor audience in the crypto space, and yet things may be where they're not so different. Is that your experience, Cinta?
I'm second guessing because I would say 99% of the donations from individuals, donations made in crypto, have been anonymous. So I'm second guessing that they have been made by the people I meet at those blockchain crypto events. But I'm making this assumption because I genuinely don't know. And something I would like to, because I think there is a level of confusion by the general public around anonymous donations. Some people get confused by donors who want to remain anonymous. And that has been going on for decades, if not centuries. Somebody makes a donation, don't want to be acknowledged, low maintenance, no thank you, I don't want my name anywhere. That is not problematic from a governance perspective. However, a genuinely anonymous donation, arriving to the office and finding an envelope that somebody gave through your door with £50,000, which would be the equivalent of finding a crypto donation of £50,000 of dollars in your wallet, that is an issue. It's a quality problem to have, but nevertheless, it's an issue that the charity needs to deal with. And we have tried to put everything in place to avoid situations where the charity is in a strange kind of limbo of having some money, but then having to go to the charity commission, explain what happened. We don't know who this person is. Can we keep the money? Can we not keep the money? So we have put as many guidelines as possible to avoid those circumstances. But I think anonymity brings that governance challenge. Jess potentially has more references of comparison traditional donor and crypto donor. In our case, because we don't have so many individual donors per se, even traditionally, the crypto donors, by coincidence or not, they have been 99% genuinely anonymous. It's difficult for me to make, to confirm how different or similar they are. And a key thing that we as a charity, we need to improve and we need to work on is the stewardship of these donors, because they have been anonymous. So again, I'm making assumptions. They want to find out more information about the charity through social media. Is LinkedIn appropriate? Is X appropriate? Again, I'm talking to people that are telling me use this or not that, but I don't have enough data. We have not been doing this at the big enough a scale for long enough to know if we are doing it right or not. Because again, is this donation that I received today a repeated donation from somebody who donated 6 months ago and 12 months ago, or is somebody completely new? I don't know, because it's an anonymous donation. So it brings quite a lot of challenges in that respect.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really interesting. It's interesting how anonymity can generate a lot of perhaps different reactions or impressions in people's minds, right? Especially in a time where the whole sales and marketing process for a lot of businesses these days is about knowing as much as possible about your customer so that you can, target them and market to them. And I wonder how much of sort of the anonymity aspect of the crypto industry is just perhaps partly cultural, that people sort of choose privacy by default if they can as part of their natural interaction online, and how many people sort of really guard it as like a really core value or something that they're seeking to protect it as a sort of key ends in itself. Aidan, how about you? What's your sort of general sense on this, and what experiences have you had in your company?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because one of the distinctions I want to make is anonymity doesn't necessarily mean that there's an inherent risk there, because just because a donor is choosing to be anonymous doesn't mean that, we're bypassing some sort of anti-money laundering or corruption piece. If anything, blockchain lends itself because it is more transparent and you can scan quickly the entire blockchain to understand if there's any anti-money laundering risk there. I do think that, as Cinta and Jessica both said, anonymous donors have been something that has existed for a long time. But I think when it comes to crypto donors, one thing that shouldn't be lost is the fact that they do have the same motivations as traditional donors. So it's about connecting with them on their shared values and making a meaningful impact. And whether that's being able to then reach back out and say, thank you so much for your donation. This is where the impact lies. I think that across the board, charities are feeling that pressure, right, to show the actual impact of where every dollar is gone. So I think that kind of extends to what Cinta was saying around how do we actually do proper storytelling, right? How do we translate where that dollar has gone into something that is, can be consumed whether you are anonymous or not. And that is just by making sure that we're retelling the human stories that comes from, crypto donations. Where is that money going? But I think the anonymous factor there, whether they're choosing to put their name to it or not, it should be shared externally what we're doing with that money.
Oh,
Yeah.
could I just hop in on that?
Yeah, please.
I think that's a really good point about showing where the money goes, and an example that sprung to mind as you said that was Save the Children's crypto campaign. They're obviously very well known as a charity that accepts crypto, and their Hosel Hope campaign that I think was 2023. They had leaderboards where crypto donors could have their names, as well as a list of where the money goes in a very clear kind of shopping list way, and that was hugely successful. So yeah, I suppose that very much supports what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've seen loads of other larger charities do stuff like that too, like UNHRC, what they did with their campaign for the Ukraine, like being able to see the actual impact of, okay, we mobilized crypto natives in that space, and then that meant X amount of people got support on the ground when, Ukraine was attacked. So that all kind of supports the user journey.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good example of showing how, being proactive and using new technology can enable you to engage with a donor audience that in ways that perhaps just wasn't possible before, or perhaps charities hadn't even thought of doing previously. So it's great to see those kind of examples, and I think just shows how much innovation, there could still be in a space like charitable giving. We've actually just had a question from the chat, which still relates in this subject, so maybe we can just address it now. The question says, as a charity, do you have additional requirements on donor KYC for crypto donations? Is that, if so, how do you manage this? Anyone like to comment on that?
I can jump in just from what I've seen other organizations do. So charities can kind of approach this in two ways. So you can open yourself to unrestricted donations through cryptocurrency. So you could have an API, a widget on your website, and with that, you can build some restrictions in place. So most organizations that we work with, charities we work with, they put in parameters. So they'll maybe feel comfortable with a crypto donation that's less than, say, 10K, and that they're happy for a bit of anonymity there, knowing that we're still doing AML screening and that there's still a KYC being done on that donor, but they might not know necessarily who it is, and they don't have to issue an MOU, for example. And there's other charities that prefer to have all of this be through, direct donors that they interact with. And in that case, you can put on your website a call to action and say, hey, look, we're accepting crypto donations, we're accepting stablecoins. Reach out to us if you'd like to enable that. But then in that way, you are kind of cutting yourself off a little bit from that unrestricted donation, which is obviously so valuable. If that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I suppose it just highlights the fact that there's a programmability to the technology, isn't there, that really allows charities or other businesses to be very targeted in how they choose to structure and allow for these kind of donations to happen. Okay, great. Well, I mean, I think another sort of adjacent thing to this topic is around things like gift aid and tax, which I think is inevitably a relevant factor, particularly for crypto, in ways that perhaps isn't through other payment channels. So Aidan, maybe you can just share your perspective in terms of, it's quite a nuanced issue, isn't it, tax, particularly with crypto, given that these are tokens rather than cash that are being used to make the donation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just prerequisite my response is saying, obviously, everyone should seek their own professional advice, and this isn't seen as tax treatment advice. And this is just general of what we're seeing in the market. So there's kind of two perspectives. The US obviously is doing it quite differently than the UK at the moment, and that's because they have clear guidance and regulation in place. But what we are seeing in the UK, that donating cryptocurrencies directly to a registered charity can be tax efficient because the donor generally does not have to pay capital gains tax on any of the increase in that asset value. So we're seeing, crypto natives that have made a large amount of money, with Crypto Summer and all of these different events. And now they're looking with a bit more regulation coming into place in the UK to mobilize that money that they've made. And obviously, this doesn't qualify for gift aid, so they don't benefit from the same income tax relief, but that capital gains tax is still of interest. And the US obviously has a more established framework for donating digital assets, and that had some additional incentives for donor. But as that UK position is developing, it's kind of clear that we can see the direction of travel is that digital assets are becoming a more recognized part of our financial landscape.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think just from our experience as well in CryptoUK, a lot of our conversations with HMRC, have revolved around these types of questions. People who want to gift their crypto, today they face taxable events in doing so, even for stablecoins. And I think it's certainly been interesting from our perspective to discover that not all of those effects are necessarily something that the tax regulators were particularly aware of. It's something that is kind of a legacy of the default treatment of these assets, but there's clearly a wide open discussion and dialogue around how this should happen in future. So it'll be interesting to see how that particular issue evolves from a tax and regulatory perspective, given that I think governments have consistently spoken about their desire to encourage gifting and charitable donations. And so I think we can definitely expect to sort of see some changes in the future on this topic. We recently had a consultation response to HMRC on this exact topic, particularly around the treatment of stablecoins, which of course many people think of as like a cash instrument, and hopefully it could be treated that way for charitable giving as well. So definitely a sort of watch this space. And interesting to hear the US comparison. So perhaps we can move on to maybe just some specific sort of case studies or examples from your background on how giving and crypto donations has supported the core mission of charitable giving of your organizations. So, Cinta, is there a specific example or a crypto sort of oriented case that you can share with us?
So I'm going to go with our biggest ever crypto donation. We are talking about an NFT artist who, surprise, surprise, after selling a limited edition, decided to donate 50% of the proceeds to our charity. We were not aware of this artist, at least consciously. We don't know who is behind that artist, or maybe we do know who is behind that artist, but that artist is anonymous, works with a pseudonym. Everybody knows him with this name. They don't even know who is behind that. So somehow this person became aware of our charity, decided to donate to a charity in New York and to our charity in the UK. We just realized because this NFT artist in social media posted about it and screenshot the donation to our charity. And that donation, the quantity allowed us to establish a Roald nurse for a full year. So just through that support, over 100 families received support for a year. And I think this is just a marvelous example of kind of somebody who we would definitely as a charity would not be able to reach any other way, somehow through the fact that we were accepting cryptocurrency. At that point, we were making quite a lot of noise, as much noise as we could, about the fact that we were engaging with the crypto sector, with the NFT creators. Thanks to that, we engaged with this individual. who made this substantial donation.
Yeah, thanks. That's such an amazing example, and I imagine it must have completely transformed your sort of perspective on it as a channel for receiving gifting like that.
Correct. And I think in a way it validated the fact that there was something in there for us, despite being in the UK. And I appreciate that in the UK, there is not so much adoption. We are more cautious about certain things. It highlighted some of the risks, because that was an NFT artist who was doing a type of art that potentially was not naturally aligned with the taste of our existing donors and potentially with some key stakeholders. But nevertheless, is an artist who is developing her craft and decided to support the charity through it. A key thing that validated was that at that point, we were investing a lot of time engaging with the community. And at this point was a big kind of engage with everybody at any time. We didn't know exactly who is who or who is behind what, but engage with them. And it's quite a small community-ish, and the message goes around. Somehow people talk about this, particularly in the UK. If somebody wants to support a UK charity, the pool is not that big. That is the good news for UK charities. If they generally want to support the UK, their options are limited. So maybe you are the beneficiary.
And I guess it just goes to show you never know who's out there, do you? You know, who could be following your charity silently, and then one day, you know, something like that can happen. Jess, how about you? What, perhaps a specific example from your side?
Well, I suppose our example would be in 2024. Every year we run we accept crypto donations year round, and we always have social media posts and stuff like that. But every year around Christmas we do a specific push and kind of have a lot of exciting new assets, and a tracker on the website, a totalizer, if you will, and things like that to kind of get a bit of hype around it. And in 2024, we did that specifically linked. All donations were going towards a research project that was using AI as part of its research in finding a cure for dementia. So there was that kind of technological link between the research project as well as the form of donations, which we thought worked quite nicely. And we were very keen to shout about it on socials in all of our posts about it. And we got quite a lot of traction through our posts on Twitter and stuff like that. And it was a really successful fundraising project for us. It was, I should say, it was one part of you know, it's not like it fully funded research, the project, far from it. But the funds going towards that project was really nice to have that definite link between the crypto and the eventual end goal, because as we've talked about before, that sort of traceability of donation is something that really appeals to a crypto donor, we think, and data suggests, and that was a really successful example of that.
Great. And Aidan, how about you? What kind of projects can you share, you know, that you're coming across in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting because there's loads of really exciting fundraising activities that are being done by all different types of organizations, whether big or small, when it comes to crypto funding. But one of the things that gets me really excited is moving on from just the crypto donations, but how are we like enabling the underlying technology to move money cross-border quickly with less friction. So that's where we're seeing a lot of movement with like larger charities that are trying to deliver frontline aid, and making sure that they can reach unbanked communities. You know, in a crisis, you're not going to be able to access your bank account, but you likely will be able to access your phone. So being able to access a digital wallet in that instance could mean, you know, life or death, really. So seeing that increased transparency, all of those projects that are being trialed by, you know, the UN, UNICEF, all these large organizations. But kind of beyond that, one of my favorites is a project that we're working with in London that works with an unhoused community, and how they're able to show to their donors, oh, look, the transfer of funds is going through to these individuals, and this is a storytelling capability because we're utilizing blockchain technology. So kind of across the board, whether big or small, there's loads of charities doing some really interesting work when it comes to blockchain.
Yeah, and out of interest, those large organizations you mentioned, do they you accept crypto donations as well? Do you know, or they do?
Yes. Yeah, so
Right.
I think it's 70% of Forbes top 100 charities are accepting crypto donations at the moment. The UN and UNICEF each have their own crypto
Right.
fund. But yes, yeah.
Okay, so outside the UK, I think it really shows, doesn't it, how it's a global sort of channel now. It's not just sort of a niche or a small part of the sort of charity industries.
Absolutely. And most of our partners at LMAX are UK located, so it's definitely moving quite quickly in this market.
Great. Well, thank you. That's a really interesting perspective, and I think as we start to move towards sort of the end of the discussion, perhaps we can just focus a little bit about the future. How do each of you see crypto's role in philanthropy going forward, perhaps over 3, 5, 10 years? Perhaps to any of you would like to add some comments on that.
I don't mind hopping in on that. I mean, I obviously hope the future is bright for crypto philanthropy. But where I see it going over the next decade, perhaps if we're doing blue sky thinking, if you will, there's that link between crypto and gifts and wills that's possible to develop once legislation and kind of infrastructure has been established, as well as just an increase in visibility around crypto donations of the more day-to-day sort, as we get more legislation in the UK and it's more well known about that some charities accept crypto. I think this will just increase. Probably that will happen more in the immediate term as well. And yeah, I mean, hopefully it will just continue to grow as a really positive tool for funding real world change. I think it's really exciting how the link between digital currencies and real world change, and there's real potential for that to grow and become kind of a core part of that sort of digital infrastructure as well as charities infrastructure. So yeah, certainly we've seen a lot of exciting growth in the past couple of years with crypto philanthropy, and hopefully the sky's the limit.
I'm happy to build on what Jessica just said as well. I
Sure.
mean, obviously, with the market shifting towards the adoption of stablecoins, I think we're going to just see a massive boom in terms of how we engage with blockchain. One of the things I think quite interesting is the fact that, as much skepticism there is around digital assets, I think that there would be some shock about the fact of how much you actually engage with that asset class without realizing. So a good example is if you use MasterCard today, a large portion of your transactions are actually being settled on chain because of stablecoins. And the market's just shifting towards that space. And along with that is the crypto philanthropy market. There's a lot of research that's been done by other providers that shows what that scale is going to look like. And it's looking to move in the next 10 years towards being 89 billion that's being donated in digital assets. So there's some naysayers. I do think that the market's shifting that way. And, my kind of final piece of feedback would just be that, the real opportunity isn't just crypto itself. It's about the underlying technology and how can early adopters benefit from that.
Yeah, thanks, Aidan. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I imagine we're sort of preaching to the converted here as CryptoUK members, and many of the audience will be sort of supporters of the industry. But perhaps the sort of the sign of success is that people stop realizing even altogether whether or not the donation that they're making is happening on crypto rails or somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Cinta, how about you?
Yeah, what you just said resonates very well, because I think even if I don't know enough about cryptocurrencies, blockchain to make a prediction, but my guess is that in 10 years, in the same way we are not talking about fiat donations, we will not be talking about crypto donations, because yeah, it doesn't really matter if you send me a check or a crypto donation. So hopefully we will be talking about donations, and we will be treating crypto as many other channels, conduits for the money to get, or the assets to get to the charity. But I think that there are a few things that potentially need to happen in a practical manner. And I think the first two are quite connected. One is kind of, in the UK, we need a wider adoption and more visible adoption. Still, when you go, and I appreciate this, we're preaching to the converted here, But when you go to the third sector audience, there is still a lot of reluctancy and a lot of kind of not fully grasping why you are talking to me about this. Even some of the most kind of powerful voices, I would say they are not only agnostic, but against. Or it feels, at least to me, when I read certain articles and certain guidance, that clearly I don't think you are getting it. And if you are getting it, you are against it. So I think there is a wider responsible adoption, which will create more kind of a big scale, not anecdotal impact data. It will be data around the impact of crypto donations. At the moment, we are relying on, oh, this is a nice case study, which is fine. But there is, I don't think, enough data shared that creates a volume to make genuine noise and legitimize somehow crypto philanthropy. And potentially a bit controversial, but I think there is a need for the actual sector, and I'm talking the sector in kind of a wider sense, to start leading by example and donating in crypto. We have been, as a charity, in a very surreal situation of companies working in this space donating fiat to our charity. That should be an anomaly. So I want to believe that people who work in the crypto space, from a professional perspective, and that is not necessarily the people who create these kind of platforms and facilitate donations. It's kind of, if you have as a sector crypto as an accountant and your accounting company is making a donation this Christmas, would you consider making this donation in crypto? I think that is leading by example and not just putting a line on your website. We deal with the crypto sector because, it's business for us. There is a discrepancy between behavior and positioning of certain companies. And I would say all of that, we kind of build confidence, and the actions influence more than conversations sometimes. And I'm missing, at least from my personal perspective, from our charity perspective, we are missing this engagement of the sector genuinely in crypto donations. And something I would say, I don't know if we have many charities, if any, listening to this, but I would say you don't have to launch tomorrow with crypto philanthropy. You don't need to aim to start accepting crypto donations this year, but challenge yourself and start learning about it today. At least make an informed decision. Maybe it's not for you, maybe not yet, maybe never. But I think today is the day that you should start learning about it, because there is a potential opportunity. And the last thing is, everything needs to be done in a way by charities that maintains the trust that is so hard to build, and that charities are nothing without their trust. So anything that we do around crypto philanthropy, engaging with the sector, we cannot pay too high price. We cannot pay with losing our trust, the trust that has taken so long and so much work to build.
Thank you, Cinta. I think that's beautifully said. I think there's so much opportunity, and like you say, reputation is so important. And I think for many of the charities out there, like you said, it's sort of baby steps, isn't it? You don't have to rush straight in. You can start small, and fortunately, we have organizations like yours and like ours where people can reach out for resources, for help, to ask questions. And so with questions, perhaps I can just, before we finish, briefly touch on a few other comments we've had from the audience. Mark here has said that from a regulatory perspective, crypto assets are deemed to be very high risk, and therefore enhanced due diligence must be undertaken. I think that is a fair point. It's a very different sort of token backdrop, isn't it, to sort of standard cash donations. And we've also got a comment here from Tim that said, note that as soon as any tax benefits are realized, be these UK CGT or the United States, then anonymity goes out the window. US tax rules are much more beneficial for donors, and you should not ignore the potential of becoming fiscally sponsored so you can get US crypto donations and the US donors get their tax benefits. Any comments on that? Nope. I think it's an interesting point. And perhaps just to finish then, no, I think this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you to all of you, the three of you, for being here with us today and sharing your expertise with us, your background and experience. Perhaps I can just give you all a minute or two at the end each to share where people can reach out to you. Perhaps just share a bit more about what you guys do, and if anyone wants to reach out, where they can find you. Perhaps Aidan.
Yeah, sure. So if building on what Cinta said, if you're interested in learning more about receiving or giving digital assets, cryptocurrencies, stablecoins, any asset really, we'd love to be in touch. We can give you some extra support, even if it's just a conversation generally about the market, whether that be like looking at your treasury function or how do you fit this into your fundraising strategy. You can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or my email is Alberico@lmax.com, or reach out to us at LMAX group, and we'd be happy to have a conversation and share our experience.
And Jess?
Well, I suppose first and foremost, if you're interested in the work Alzheimer's Research UK is doing with crypto, or keen on donating to help fund dementia research, then you can visit Alzheimer's Research UK, donate crypto. If you just search that, it's the top hit on Google. Or indeed, you can see all the amazing projects we've got. We've got Walk for a Cure going at the moment, and lots of exciting fundraising opportunities. So whatever your flavour of fundraising, there's that opportunity for you there. And if alternatively you're interested in talking more about crypto donations from a charity perspective, I'd love to talk to people about that. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my email, which is jessica.black@alzheimersresearchuk.org.
Thanks, Jess. And Cinta?
So if you want to find out more about the charity, our charity is roaldalcharity.org. There is a section to donate and where we explain about different ways to support us. One way is through crypto. You will see an extensive questions and answers section, which we did just to kind of inform people of how we approach crypto philanthropy. You can reach to me via LinkedIn, Cinta Esmel. There are not many people with that name, I assure you. My email is cinta@roaldalcharity.org. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best thing. Check our website. Anything to do with crypto donations, I'm the person. But if you want to find anything else about the charity, I will find the right individual.
Great. Thank you, Cinta. Well, look, I thought that was a fascinating conversation. Thank you to all three of you for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. I hope you all found that an enjoyable and informative discussion. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.